Hi everyone, welcome back to Rabbi's Reflection. I'm glad that you're joining with me today. We'll be reading from the book Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Naomi Remen and reading the story titled Silence. So stay with us as we read through the story and then offer some reflections. As an adolescent, I had a summer job working as a volunteer companion in a nursing home for the aged. The job began with a 2-week intensive training about communicating with the elderly. There seemed to be a great deal to remember, and what had begun as a rather heartfelt way to spend a teenage summer quickly became a regimented set of techniques and skills for which I would be evaluated by the nursing staff. By the first day of actual patient contact, I was very anxious. My first assignment was to visit with a 96-year-old woman who had not spoken for more than a year. A psychiatrist had diagnosed her as having senile dementia, but she had not responded to medication. The nurses doubted that she would talk to me, but hoped I could engage her in a mutual activity. I was given a large basket filled with glass beads of every imaginable size and color. We would string beads together. I was to report back to the nursing station in an hour. I did not want to see this patient. Her great age frightened me, and the words senile dementia suggested that not only was she older by far than anyone I had ever met, she was crazy too. Filled with foreboding, I knocked on the closed door of her room. There was no answer. Opening the door, I found myself in a small room lit by a single window which faced the morning sun. 2 chairs had been placed in front of the window. In one sat a very old lady looking out. The other was empty. I stood just inside the door for a time, but she did not acknowledge my presence in any way. Uncertain of what to do next, I went to the empty chair and sat down, the basket of beads on my lap. She did not seem to notice that I had come. For a while, I tried to find some way to open a conversation. I was painfully shy at this time, which was one of the reasons my parents had suggested I take this job, and I would have had a hard time even in less difficult circumstances. The silence in the room was absolute. Somehow it almost seemed rude to speak, yet I desperately wanted to succeed in my task. I considered and discarded all the ways of making conversation suggested in the training. None of them seemed possible. The old woman continued to look toward the window, her face half hidden from me, barely breathing. Finally, I simply gave up and sat with the basket of glass beads in my lap for the full hour. It was quite peaceful. The silence was broken at last by the little bell which signified the end of the morning activity. Taking hold of the basket again, I prepared to leave. But I was only 14, and curiosity overcame me. Turning to the old woman, I asked, "What are you looking at?" I immediately flushed. Prying into the lives of the residents was strictly forbidden. Perhaps she had not heard, but she had. Slowly, she turned toward me, and I could see her face for the first time. It was radiant. In a voice filled with joy, she said, "Why, child, I am looking at the light." Many years later, as a pediatrician, I would watch newborns look at light with that same rapt expression, almost as if they were listening for something. Fortunately, I had not been able to find a way to interrupt. A 96-year-old woman may stop speaking because arteriosclerosis has damaged her brain, or she has become psychotic and she is no longer able to speak. But she may also have withdrawn into a space between the worlds to contemplate what is next, to spread her sails and patiently wait to catch the light. I had found her by accident, or perhaps by grace. I have often wondered what would have happened had I been the highly trained technical physician I would shortly become. At that time, I would not have known how to find her and sit with her, how to learn from her about silence and trusting life. Now, many years later, I hope that I do. What a beautiful and heart-wrenching but tragic and gentle story. I have a lot of words to use to describe this. And I think for many of us who are tuning in today and watching and thinking about this story hits very close to home. We broadcast this and we watch this as residents of the Jewish home. And for many of us, it's our neighbors, our dear friends, those who live on the unit with us, who may be in a similar state to the woman that was described in the story. And so perhaps, and I understand it well, you started to hear this story and then you needed to turn it off because it was too much. Or perhaps you listened to the story and it just rubbed you the wrong way, but you couldn't put your finger on it. And I get that, and I understand. But I think this story is teaching us something so valuable. Whether we're able to speak or whether we can't speak, whether we're able to fully communicate with another person or whether we're not able to, what this story teaches us is about the uncertainty of our lives. We feel uncertainty all the time, or I feel uncertainty all the time. What should I say? What should I do? What's the best way to interact? How do I approach someone about such and such an issue? How do I say things in the right way? And we're constantly worried about these things. And I think what this story teaches us is to just sit with someone, to just be with them, to sit with them for an hour in silence. And that silence then isn't one that's tinged with or filled with anxiety or fears of what to do or what to say, but to settle into a silence that's calming, that's connecting, that's really present. How beautiful it was for Dr. Remen, who was then a 14-year-old girl, to just be at a loss for words and realize that the best thing to do was just to sit with this woman, sit in the chair next to her as she looked out the window and stared into the light. And so I think that's what we can offer to each of you, to ourselves and to those that we interact with, to sit with each other, to be with each other. We don't necessarily have to say anything. It's our presence, our being, and perhaps even the silence itself that can allow us to connect at a very deep level with one another. So thank you so much for taking the time to reflect, staying with us even if the subject material felt a little challenging, and I hope you gained something from it, and I look forward to continuing to reflect with you soon. Have a blessed one.